Chapter 12, The Beast from Earth. Did you think I'd forget about him? The metaphors are interesting. Why is one beast, quote, from the water, and the other is, quote, from the earth? Yes, Satan has a ton of water, dragon, Leviathan references. Double yes. The gates of the down place are mostly described with watery descriptions. I mean, check out Jonah. So it makes sense for the Antichrist to come out of the sea when the 5 + 1 + 1 fellows have all died. Their souls need to be in the down place for them to ascend, like it said in the previous chapter. The Antichrist is going to come up from the down place to rule. But the other guy? Oh, he's an earth metaphor. Why an earth metaphor? I think he's going to be born normally and naturally. His DNA is going to come from parents who are or were on the earth. Aside from being called the beast from earth, he is also known as the Antichrist prophet. And quite surprisingly, he has as much to do with the final years as the Antichrist. So let's read his introduction in Revelation 13, verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon, and he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he does great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceives them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do it in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image of the beast, who had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as not worship the image of the beast should be killed. All right, again, King James. All right, so let's look at the characteristics described. Like a lamb, to me, seems some sort of pleasing form. The phrase a dragon, obviously, speaking evil. Great wonders. Now, this insinuates miracles and wonders make him a sorcerer of sorts. When it says deceives them, it obviously references that he will be some sort of false hero. But when it says an image of the beast or to the beast, that jumps off the page to me as cloning. It could be a statue, but cloning. And power to give life. Whoa. Now, life returns to an empty body, or is it life returning to a clone? All right. I've heard the statue theory, but this is the 21st century, folks, where we have AI. I mean, statues aren't going to fool anyone. The ability to play with a human marionette is much more impressive, and restoring a body to life is one thing, but returning a soul? Dang. But this guy also creates a religion. He's the speaker. He's the miracle worker. From the 6th seal all the way to Armageddon, this guy is bent on wiping out Christians. So who is he? Where did he come from? While I strongly believe that the abomination of desolation is the beast from sea, the Antichrist, who is likely manufactured through DNA, the other guy we just met is just as bad. In fact, I think we might need to examine some of those titles we read about earlier. So let's look again at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, when it says, Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember not that when I was with you, I told you these things. And now you know that withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time. King James. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Armageddon stuff. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. See? And with all deceivableness of righteousness in them that perish. Polysyllabic words, King James. Because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe it not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. In these verses, I suddenly began to wonder if we're talking about the beast from water or the beast from earth. Our prophet could be the man of sin. Notice how this passage uses the word revealed 3 times. What's going on with that? To be revealed, you need to be hidden, don't you? Yes, my theory about DNA could work here. A secret DNA project could suddenly be revealed. Yet, I think there might be some meaning in the symbol beast from earth rather than sea. Remember, I go down rabbit holes with my obsessions. I'm always trying to bring meaning where there might not be any meaning. If a verse doesn't make sense to me, it'll fester until I can make it jive with the other theories. So, we need to have a conversation about Judas, the son of perdition. As I mentioned earlier, Team Evil is much more complicated than just Team Satan. You have armies of demons, 4 fallen angels, Apollyon, Mr. Sea, and Mr. Earth, Satan, Death, and Hades. Now, I've speculated that perdition is likely something far more sinister than Satan, since he's likely either capital D Death or capital H Hades as one of the 2 final enemies. Sons of perdition, sons of Belial, and many antichrists can be seen throughout the Old Testament, yet Jesus says something quite chilling during the Last Supper scene. So let me first recap. It's dusk, the upper room, the Lamb Day has just begun. Sometime during the evening, Judas Iscariot ducks out after being slyly identified by Jesus to John. Then Jesus thanks God for giving him his disciples. That's when Jesus says this in John 17, verse 6. I have manifested thy name unto the men which thou gavest me out of the world. Thine they were, and thou gavest them me, and they have kept thy word. Now they have known that all things whatsoever thou hast given me are of thee. For I have given unto them the words which thou hast given me, and they have received them, and have known surely that I came out of thee, and they have believed that thou didst send me. I pray for them. I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me, for they are thine, and all mine are thine, and thine are mine, and I am glorified in them. And now I am no more in the world, but these are in the world. And I can't come to thee, Holy Father. Keep through thine own name those whom thou hast given me, but that they may be one as we are. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Those that thou gavest me I have kept, and none of them is lost, but the son of perdition, that the scripture might be fulfilled. To paraphrase Jesus, you gave me 11 disciples. I didn't lose any of them. Judas doesn't count because he is the son of perdition. Never lost something I never had. Judas was born evil. Whoa. Jesus just connected Judas to being a son of perdition. And that festered in me for years. I mean, as a child, I saw movies that portrayed Judas as a jealous, petty, greedy, etc., blah, blah, blah. He showed human emotions and even repentance when he hung himself over guilt. In a way, it was hard to differentiate him from the denial of Peter. Yet, here's Jesus calling Judas the son of perdition. Mind you, there are other really bizarre evil phrases used earlier in the Last Supper scene. Don't forget when, quote, Satan entered into Judas. You can see that in Luke 22:3. And elsewhere where it says Satan entered into him, that's John 13:27. I mean, say what? They don't normally film that part, do they? Well, granted, Judas likely wasn't spinning his head and vomiting pea soup, but two accounts describe a possession by one of the biggest players on Team Evil. So not only do you have a son of perdition reference, but you also have a strange alliance with Satan. And here's a question that festered in my mind. When did Judas stop being possessed by Satan? Now remember, he immediately goes to the priest to arrange for the arrest, right? That's Satan. I mean, he accompanies a detachment of soldiers, upward of 500, with plans to crush Christianity at the Mount of Olives. But that's Satan. However, before they get to the Mount of Olives, Jesus steps out of the Garden of Gethsemane and turns himself in, saving the crowd on the Mount of Olives. With a kiss, Jesus is betrayed by a trusted friend. But that's Satan. Jesus just foiled Satan's plan to crush Christianity on the Mount of Olives. And when Satan realizes he's been duped, he and Judas tries to give the money back to stop the sham trial. Why? Because Jesus wants the trial, doesn't he? Unfortunately, nobody will listen to Judas anymore, who they assume has cold feet. But remember, it's not Judas, it's Satan. If Satan is panicking about his failed plan, to stop it, he'd need to be let out of Judas, and, oh yeah, Judas hangs himself. That's Satan, folks. Now, don't forget about all this Satan stuff. We'll get back to this in a few moments. It seems that, like the Antichrist, Judas had some impressive connections. So let's take a closer look at Judas. The man from Kerioth. Not much to say about Judas Iscariot. Iscariot means from Kerioth. We don't get any good anecdotes about how they met. He doesn't have any interesting stories. He's chosen from the crowd of wannabe disciples to be one of the 12 followers. Yet at the Last Supper, we find out that not only was he a thief and traitor, but that he was also, according to Jesus, a son of perdition. The aftermath of the betrayal is discussed in the book of Acts, when they have to pick a replacement for Judas on the team of 12. Now, this is what it says in Acts 1, verse 5. And in those days, Peter stood up in the midst of the disciples and said, the number of names together were about 120, Men and brethren, this scripture must needs have been fulfilled, which the Holy Ghost by the mouth of David spake before concerning Judas, which was guide to them that took Jesus. For he was numbered with us, and had obtained part of this ministry. Now this man purchased a field with the reward of iniquity, and falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. And it was known unto all the dwellers at Jerusalem, insomuch as that field is called in their proper tongue Akeldama, which is to say, the field of blood. Gross, violent, and may I speculate, that's Satan. Most people, when they hang themselves, they don't explode like Judas exploded. I mean, that might have been the end of the story for most. But Peter makes a very wild connection in the next verse. He officially goes on record to say that Judas was involved in an Old Testament prophecy. I mean, Peter, not Jason Lee Willis this time, brings up a specific prophecy and stamps his interpretation right on it by saying, that's Judas. Curious? First, here's what Peter said in Acts. Verse 20 reads, For it is written in the book of Psalms, Let his habitation be desolate, and let no man dwell therein, and his bishopric let another take. Again, that's Old King James. But here is the passage that Peter is referencing. It's Psalm 109. And this is what it reads. It starts off, the translated title is Song of the Slandered. Verse 1. To the chief musician, a psalm of David. Again, Peter referenced the David comment. Hold not thy peace, O God of my praise, for the mouth of the wicked and the mouth of the deceitful are opened against me. They have spoken against me with a lying tongue. They encompass me about also with words of hatred, and fought against me without a cause. For my love they are my adversaries, but I give myself unto prayer. Okay. And they have rewarded me evil for good, and hatred for my love. Set thou a wicked man over him, and let Satan stand at his right hand. When he be judged, let him be condemned, and let his prayer become sin. Let his days be few, and, this is what Peter was referencing, let another take his office. It keeps going, though. Let his children be fatherless, and his wife a widow. Let his children be continually vagabonds and beg. Let them seek their bread out also of the desolate places. Let the extortioner catch all that he hath, and let the strangers spoil his labor. Let there be none to extend mercy unto him, neither let there be any to favor his fatherless children. Let his posterity be cut off, and in the generation following let their name be blotted out. Let the iniquity of his fathers be remembered with the Lord, and let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. Let them be before the Lord continually, that he may cut off the memory of them from the earth. Because that he remembered not to show mercy, but persecuted the poor and needy man, that he might even slay, be broken in heart. As he loved cursing, so let it come unto him. As he delighted not in blessing, so let it be far from him. As he clothed himself with cursing, like as with his garment, so let it come into his bowels. like water, and oil into his bones. Let it be unto him as the garment which covers him, and for a girdle wherewith he is girdled continually. Let this be the reward of mine adversaries from the Lord, and of them that speak evil against my soul. Now, verse 21 is the turn where David asks for strength in dealing with evil. So I'll stop there, but dang, that was a lot to unpack. I mean, in verse 8, you've got the Peter connection to Judas, right? But according to Peter, the him in Psalm 109 is Judas. I mean, that's on the record. So let's review this with Judas in mind as the antecedent to David's vague prayer. All right, let's look at this closer. Let his prayer become sin. What could that mean? I mean, this guy can fake being a good disciple, but his works are evil. As the son of perdition, this guy was born bad. Okay, let's look at another one. His days be few. Judas dies as a young man. Well, it never says he's apparently an angry young man. Look at the phrase, Satan stand at his right hand. I mean, we're coming back to this one in a little bit, but notice how this phrase implies that Satan assists him. Again, I believe that perdition outranks Satan in the playing deck of evil cards. While Luke and John bring up that Satan possessed Judas, it apparently fulfills this prophecy also. But this phrase is interesting. Let his children be fatherless. Now, sorry about this, but we're going down this rabbit hole for the rest of the chapter. Judas had kids? I mean, the grandchildren of perdition? Judas turned out to be an unholy villain, right? And despite the best intentions of forgiving Christians, these kids would not be safe in Israel after this betrayal. Wow, though, kids? You'll see why this intrigues me shortly. But there's another one. His wife, a widow? So there's a Mrs. Iscariot, isn't there? If I didn't read so much mythology and lore, this one wouldn't go anywhere, but I'm coming back to her also. The phrase, let their name be blotted out. Now, here's where things get very curious. Yes, being born from perdition likely means you're not written down in the book of life. Sorry, kids. That's the most obvious sins of the father metaphor here. However, blotting out implies covering up or hiding. The kids didn't die. So what happened? They vanished. And that theme continues. Look at the phrase, children be continually vagabonds. Now, vagabond implies wandering. So this clue seems to imply not only did they go underground, but they had to stay on the run. Did they go someplace far, far away? I'm betting so. And then continually also seems to imply that this wasn't a brief experience. The bloodline of Judas stays on the run from generation to generation to generation. And we get some backstory too. It says, let the iniquity of his fathers be remembered. Now, sins of Judas's fathers, plural? I mean, mother is singular, yet father is plural. I mean, surely this means forefathers or something. Yet, I'm left with the curiosity about who Judas's fathers were. Again, then we need to look closer at let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. Now, centuries before Judas was born, David wrote a poem, Psalm 109, about evils of Judas Iscariot's mom? I mean, what's going on with that? I mean, isn't betraying the Christ enough, right? That should be like the evil. So why bring up mom? I mean, she must have been impressively wicked to warrant a line in David's poem, centuries before she came into existence. Okay, just remember the mother part. Now, it says then, before the Lord continually. Here we go again. Continually is mentioned once more. The implication is that this curse will not be lifted quickly. Remember, the sins of the father goes for 7 generations, right? Well, what about betraying the Son of God? See my point? And then there it is. It brings up the phrase, from the earth. There it is. Beast from earth. As I mentioned earlier, spirits have a watery connection throughout the Old Testament. Just trust me. The prophet, however, will have an active bloodline. I speculate that this son of perdition will have a connection going all the way back to Judas. And then, of course, 109 brings up, come into his bowels. I mean, what are the odds, huh? There is a reason why the description of Judas's death includes guts. But the phrase oil into his bones is a very curious phrase, yet it seems to fit the infected with evil metaphor. I mean, yet considering the possession incident with Judas, I think oil into his bones could be a metaphor for that also. But look at the garment which covers him. I mean, that sounds like a mask. The bad guy thought they were being sneaky by sending Judas into the midst to thwart God's plans. Being good was a facade. I mean, that's a good theory right there. Or Satan entering him is the garment that covered Satan. So this little reference by Peter opens a whole can of worms, doesn't it? I mean, sorry about the bowels pun. But anyways, the story of Judas was not over. His parents got mentioned. Judas's wife got mentioned, and Judas's kids. And don't get me started with the kids, because Psalm 41 is also cited in connection with Judas. While David seems to focus on the Christ rather than the betrayer, it's another moment where David's reflecting on a prophecy almost 1,000 years before it arrives. So check out Psalm 42, verse 1. Again, to the chief musician, a Psalm of David. Blessed is he that considers the poor. The Lord will deliver him in times of trouble. Not Judas. Okay. The Lord will preserve him and keep him alive, and he that be blessed upon the earth, and thou wilt not deliver him unto the will of his enemies. The Lord will strengthen him upon the bed of languishing. Thou wilt make all his bed in his sickness. I said, Lord, be merciful unto me, heal my soul, for I have sinned against thee. Mine enemies speak evil of me. When shall he die, and his name perish? And if he want to see me, he speaketh vanity. His heart gathereth iniquity to himself, and he goeth abroad, he telleth it. All that hate me whisper together against me. Against me do they devise my hurt. So far, it's David whining. Okay, that's okay though. An evil disease, say they, cleaveth fast unto him, and now that he lieth, he shall rise no more. Now here it is. Yea, mine own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, which did eat of my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me. So apparently this is about Judas. But thou, O Lord, be merciful unto me, and raise me up, and I may requite them. But this I know, that thou favorest me, because mine enemy doth not triumph over me. And as for me, thou upholdest me in might, integrity, and settest me before thy face forever. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel from everlasting to everlasting. Amen and amen. Okay, again, this one is just the trusted friend. But considering the lack of backstory for Judas Iscariot and the whole Satan entered into him details, and here with the heel imagery from the Garden of Eden punishment, it makes me wonder if it's not Judas, but Satan, who was once the trusted friend. WWJD. What would Judas do? Why did Judas do it? Movie producers love humanizing Judas, but according to Jesus, the man was a son of perdition and was never good. He was a man of sin. Yet this phrase comes up again in Thessalonians 2 verse 3, that the end times won't begin until the man of sin is revealed. Again, Thessalonians 2:3 reads, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." This totally could be the Antichrist. Following the epic devastation of seal number 6, the world will need a heroic leader to help fix things up. Plus, you'll also have the pseudoscience, supernatural resurrection that'll really impress people. The world will marvel. Yet, if my theory is correct, the Antichrist will be Melchizedek-ish by not having any lineage. He's a test tube baby, a Frankenstein fabrication created by Team Evil. What's to be revealed? To reveal something, you've got to be hiding something, right? With Jesus clearly establishing Judas as the son of perdition, this verse could mean that the end times won't come until Judas is revealed. But Judas is dead, so, his kids. Back in 2006, I was studying Psalm 109 when there was a ripple in the news cycle. The Gospel of Judas had been discovered and translated. Now, I already knew about the Gnostic texts that try to poison and muddy first century Christianity. Gnostics took the name of disciples and apostles and ruined the message. The story about Jesus marrying Mary Magdalene, for example, was a whopper of a tale. The Gnostics were and are our spiritual enemies. So I was not seeking any truth from the Gospel of Judas when I learned about it. I assumed it was complete wickedness. I still feel that way. Yet, Solomon moment here, understanding our enemy is insightful. So I went down that rabbit hole, and I needed a spiritual shower afterwards. The Gospel of Judas revealed. Something can be old and true. Likewise, something can be old and a lie. When media outlets and news agencies learned a recently discovered text had just been translated, they trumpeted their horns and tried to sell it as the original Easter story. But it was just another Gnostic text, a Gnostic lie. Most of Christianity ignored it, the head in the sand like an ostrich, as a fraud or a lie. But that's cool, keep yourself pure and innocent. Yet the Gnostics were real. This unearthed text is real. Granted, it's not from God, and it's not penned by Judas since he hung himself. Yet the Gnostics wrote it down and guarded it for a reason. So while the world largely ignored this breaking news event, I stuck my nose in it and realized how it not only gave evil insight into the events of Judas, but it also gave a Gnostic plan for a nefarious concept, a hidden bloodline. The setting is 3 days before Passover, so our Sunday or Monday, depending on how you figure the 8 days, is Passover, the Lamb Day, or Celebration Day. Anyways, that's another book. Gnostic roles are often flip side. So instead of the real Jesus, he gets a pseudo-Jesus. This figure that appears to Judas is something akin to perdition or darkness or Belial. And this shadowy figure attempts to deceive the other 11 disciples, but fails, which is yay for them. Okay. But perdition asks, who has the strength to do something special? Judas steps up and recognizes perdition as a spirit from Barbello. And again, that's more Gnostic theology. Perdition then tells Judas that he will be replaced in the 12. Now, obviously, this upsets Judas. But the perdition figure sets up revenge. He describes how the final generation of humanity will be, quote, strong and holy. I mean, quite the opposite of the evil described in Revelation. You see what I mean about Bizarro World. Perdition then adds that, quote, no host of angels of the stars will rule over them. And what does that mean? They are godless. Here's the pitch to Easter week Judas. You can get your revenge over the 11 by agreeing to a plan that lets your offspring rule over humanity. Then the text dumps a bunch of Gnostic philosophies on Judas. The perdition figure talks smack about God and the evil he created with flesh and the physical world. Destroying flesh and the physical world will bring us closer to the original spiritual world, apparently. Okay. Perdition, the fake Jesus figure, then spins reality and explains that the church being set up by Jesus will only lead to vile, evil priests. I mean, forget 2,000 years of bringing salvation. Perdition tells Judas that the church will, quote, lead you astray, since the priests are filled with, quote, lawlessness and error. Perdition wants the church to be seen as pathetic. In looking back at the past 2,000 years, I mean, it's easy to see how evil did foreshadow a corrupt human institution. I mean, every generation has evil religious leaders, right? Yet perdition, it seems, is the dark force corrupting us, or them, or the church. So who's to blame? Then the text lays out more of the game plan for Team Judas. When he says, on the last day, they will be put to shame, which is a way of seeing the prophesied apostasy, the falling away of the church. Now motivated against the church, Judas is taught the truth about Sophia, the good spirit of wisdom, and how each human has a Gnostic angel to guide them. I mean, cue up Satan. Apparently, Judas's current angel has led him astray and into believing the message of Jesus. I mean, sucker. Perdition shows him a glimpse of paradise, but tells him he'll never be able to see it if he doesn't listen up closely. Then the text drops something right out of Psalm 109. Remember all the talk about Judas and his family? Well, get a load of this. Again, this is the Gospel of Judas. Judas said, Master, could it be that my seed is under control of the rulers? Perdition answered and said unto him, Come, that I... And the Gospel of Judas has got some holes in it, so there's some missing spots, so I have to skip a little bit. Come, that I... but that you will grieve much when you see the kingdom and all its generation. When he heard it, Judas said unto him, What good is it that I have received it? For you have set me apart from that generation. I mean, seed under control of the rulers? That line jumped off the page for me. And perdition answers Judas with this promise. You will become the 13th. And you will be cursed by the other generations, and you will come to rule over them. In the last days, they will curse your ascent to the holy generation. Things get trippy for Judas, and he's shown some bizarre secrets of the cosmos, and after Perdition tells him how God is lying to us. I mean, evil fake news. Yet then another wild detail is tossed out in the next. There will be a, quote, divine self-generated figure. I mean, seriously? That sounds like my Antichrist Frankenstein dude. There is also talk of 4 angels, and remember the fallen angels in Revelation 9:14. Finally, Judas is shown a priestly luminary who will lead this final generation. Can you say Judas Jr.? Again, after Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code became a #1 international bestseller, I'd gone down the Gnostic rabbit hole a few years earlier. So when I read this text, I knew it was Bizarro World, where anything good was evil and anything evil was good. So when it talks about the myriad of angels, it's likely talking about the 200,000 demon army. When it talks about the incorruptible generation, it's likely talking about demon spirits from Nephilim. When it talks about 12 aeons, it's likely talking about 12 false gods of the underworld. I mean, like that. Yet in the gobbledygook of Gnostic symbolism, it brings up 5 beasts and the 2 who were to come. I mean, remember, this is supposedly happening in 33 AD. It appears as if Team Antichrist has a clear understanding of the 5 + 1 + 1 = 7, which leads to the 8th prophecy in Revelation, before it is even written by John. I mean, granted, this text could have been written in 200 AD. Anyways, even so, I mean, holy cow. I mean, okay, again, sorry about the bail pun. This text concludes with some more wild evil prophecies. Perdition believes the generation at the end times will live forever. If true, why wouldn't you make plans for an international space station, lunar bases, and settlement on Mars? With DNA technology, robots, and space travel, you can avoid God's wrath by leaving the planet, right? This certainly explains why the Earth is scoured, yet after 1,000 years pass, the armies of Gog and Magog appear out of nowhere, aka space. Perdition then blames God for causing Adam to sin. Of course. Perdition mocks the Revelation predictions about Team Jesus winning. Then Perdition says, the star that leads the way is your star. That's when Satan is given Judas. Satan once held the title Lucifer, the star of the morning. Why does Judas need help from Satan? To betray Jesus. This is how the text finishes. But you will exceed them, the other disciples, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me. Remember, this encounter began with Perdition taking on the familiar form of Jesus to trick Judas into a conversation. And what a conversation they had. The Holy Grail legend. But the Gnostics are big fat liars, right? Unfortunately, my time in the rabbit hole left me with a few unsettling questions. A few years before the Gospel of Judas came out, I followed Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code guy, down a historical rabbit hole. There's a method in this guy's madness. He'd thrown in bits of historical truth along with bits of fabrication. Heck, he didn't even invent the plot. What was the plot? His assertion is that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were lovers, and that after the crucifixion, Mary Magdalene took their child, a girl named Sarah, and fled the Holy Land. Thousands of years later, the lead female character turned out to be the heir of Jesus. Does Dan Brown really believe this? It doesn't matter. He just took some modern conspiracy theories and turned them into a page-turner that became very popular. There were several recent books that packaged it all together for Mr. Brown. The allure of the Dan Brown plot wasn't just a connection to old Gnostic texts, but also a sprinkling of 2,000 years of historical conspiracy theories. But just because something is old doesn't mean it's true. As I'm flipping through the pages, starring some details and crossing out others, I recognize where I'd seen some of these details. The King Arthur legend. At the bottom of the King Arthur story is the concept of hiding a secret king whose identity has been hidden from the public so he can one day assume the throne. Yes, Holy Grail means cup of Christ, but Dan Brown also brings up the symbolic interpretation of the metaphor, a holy bloodline. Writers back in the day also noted a strange conspiracy theory and put a positive spin on it for jolly old England. The surprising feature of the Holy Grail story is the Arthurian legend is its connection to Christianity. I mean, sure, there's plenty of pagan Dungeons and Dragons stuff, but that stuff is fun, whereas the Christian stuff is actually the more disturbing aspect of the tale. To summarize, Joseph of Arimathea, you know him from Luke chapter 23, he's the one who left the Holy Lands, traveled to distant England, and not only brought Christianity with him, but also brought the Holy Grail. I mean, cool, huh? When you throw in a few knights like Percival and Lancelot, things get very complicated, and suddenly there's talk about the Grail being kept in France also. Finding the Grail is a solemn oath for the Knights of the Round Table. There's nothing biblical about this story, and there is nothing mentioned about the Holy Grail. Gnostic legends, remember? Yet for more than 1,000 years, folks could openly talk about the Holy Grail and the secret heir in public. Heck, it's just a story, right? Even amateur sleuths can dig around this legend and find connections to modern Freemasons, old school Templar Knights, and even older Merovingian kings. Following Dan Brown and the modern theorists down this rabbit hole was entertaining, but at no time did I ever think Jesus had a secret heir. Even when they brought up details from the first century about a woman who had a daughter named Sarah, did I believe that? Stop the presses. Hold on. I just read the Gospel of Judas. Time out. Suddenly, the cover story, connected to a new theory of mine. Jesus didn't have a wife and child, but Judas did. Saint Sarah Lacali. At the root of the Holy Grail legend is a curious, disturbing, and well-documented legend. Dan Brown and company didn't invent the name of Sarah Christ. It turns out that at the bottom of this legend, there is a town in France that still celebrates an event that happened nearly 2,000 years ago. In the seaside village of Saint-Marie-de-la-Mer, they venerate Saint Sarah, who is known as the patron saint of displaced people. Sarah Lacali also means Sarah the Black, which is blatantly pointing out that she was a foreigner with Egyptian roots. In this local legend, displaced Jewish Christians fled the Holy Lands in, get this, 42 AD. But which ones? While not Joseph of Arimathea, this group supposedly had Lazarus and his sisters. Wasn't she named Mary? In fact, the legend says there were 3 Marys with Lazarus. So without too much debate, yep, Mary Magdalene and a child named Sarah. Wait, this legend sounds familiar. Oh, it should. Remember Hitler? I mean, how could you forget? Remember his hatred of Jews? Of course. Remember who else he targeted for death camps? Oh, Freemasons and Gypsies. So, rabbit hole number 74, the tribe of Benjamin turned to Belial and Baal worship. Rabbit hole number 75, the 11 tribes almost wiped out the tribe of Benjamin. Rabbit hole number 76, the 11 tribes took Benjamin brides to keep the tribe alive. Now, a little bit after, rabbit hole number 142, the northern tribes were assimilated by Assyria. A little farther, rabbit hole number 150, the tribe of Benjamin and Judah were taken to Babylon. Much later, rabbit hole number 265, turns out some Benjamites settled in Greece and in France. Rabbit hole number 289, these are arbitrary make-believe numbers, by the way. Rome tried to erase Jewish culture from Israel post-70 AD. Rabbit hole number 364, Jewish refugees settled in communities scattered throughout Europe. Rabbit hole number 396, the Ashkenazi Jew migration began in France before settling in Central Europe. Well, folks, each year in Sainte Marie de la Mer, thousands of gypsies make a pilgrimage to this site where they honor Saint Sarah la Kali. Like the Jewish people, the Romani people are a nation living in unwalled villages throughout Europe. Long, long ago, they migrated from the region south of the Himalayas known as the Punjab region. You know, where Alexander brought his army. You're familiar with the Romani also, targeted by Hitler after his scientists made the trip to the Himalayas. Now, obviously, the Egyptian origins of Sarah were noted by the Romani people long ago. And for the past 2,000 years, the Gypsy community revered her so much that the Catholic Church added her to the ever-expanding list of saints. We'll get back to this gyp concept in a bit, but for now, I wanted to focus on another rabbit hole, Kali. Now, in my mythology studies, likely after watching the Temple of Doom, I learned that Kali is a major goddess in Indian lore. So that makes sense. However, I came across her name several other times in my research. Her ties, ding ding, oh yes, she has strong connections to Semiramis and Aneth. With Aneth, there is even more striking connection. Both girls are bloody, violent, female warriors. Although most experts have no credible clue where the Hyksos people came from, I did stumble across the theory that they were displaced nomadic raiders in the 14th century BC who came out of the Indus Valley. So all the Baal and Aneth worship could connect to Kali and Vishnu. Getting back to Hitler, once he obtained power, he targeted Freemason groups, gypsies, and Jews. If Dan Brown and other modern hacks were able to piece together the Holy Grail equals bloodline theory, Hitler's Gnostic crazies certainly had better resources to get to the bottom of this legend. How would this serve Hitler? Well, if he wanted to challenge his fate as a short-time leader, destroying the bloodline could keep the prophet from ever being born. If he killed the right hidden heir, the Third Reich would really be able to continue for 1,000 years because the end times prophecy would not bring an end to the world. Think of it like the Romans. Let's do a census. write down all the names of the house of David, and if push comes to shove, we'll target the whole list for assassination, which is what Domitian decided to do. Like father, like son, or in this case, like Nimrod, Ramses, Domitian, like Hitler. We have to assume the Freemason alliance of Delano Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Henry Ford, and Winston Churchill stop Hitler from getting the right hidden heir. Mother Egypt. When I started working on a book about the Magi, I quickly discovered I didn't have a clue about a global power of the day called Parthia. Parthia filled the map between India and Turkey. It's Iraq, Iran, and a bunch of other territories. Since at least one of the Magi had to come from the east, and likely the Baghdad, Babylon region, I went down this rabbit hole to learn. For my plot purposes, I didn't really get much out of it, but after my cookies and algorithms noted my new interest, suddenly I was being shown related material. I found this book. Sorry, I didn't take note. I had a PDF copy of it and was lost during a phone transfer. Okay, but anyways, I had this book that proposed a fascinating theory. I poke around at the theory, and like me, a lot of historians scoffed at it. But that's what historians are good at. My point? I'm not sure how much I trust this next bit, okay? But here it goes. A generation before Jesus, a Roman by the name of Julius Caesar. Oh, hey, you know that name. Okay, good. So far, so good. He ended up claiming Egypt for the Roman Empire. In Egypt, he met a gal by the name of Cleopatra. Oh, you know her too. Okay, so far this story's legit. Okay, and ended up bringing her back to Rome as a trophy. So far, so good. The curious fact is that they had a love child named Musa. This Musa gal grew up with the nickname of the Italian whore, which kind of makes sense. Okay, she's half Italian and half Cleopatra level hot. Okay, apparently Cleopatra had other daughters, and one of them was given to Herod the Great for his help in defeating a rebellion led by Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Yes, the Shakespeare play. Okay, so far all good stuff, right? Now, back in Rome, this young woman named Musa grew up and soon became an eligible maiden. Now, a lot of this is unsubstantiated rumor, but there are entire books written on this subject, like I said. However, historical records mention how Julius's adopted son Octavius, later the guy who ruins the calendar, named Augustus, made a peace treaty with the king of Parthia. Now again, these are two global superpowers. And what does he offer the king of Parthia? Musa. Now, history is based on all the official records, which claims she is an Italian slave girl. I mean, what kind of insult would that be? However, if she was indeed the biological heir of two powerful kingdoms, Egypt and Rome, that would sweeten the deal. So, Musa becomes the bride of Phraates IV, the ruler of Parthia. And then it gets really dark. And I mean, really dark. Young Musa quickly becomes Phraates IV's favorite plaything and begins nudging the others out of the way. After she gives birth to her own son, who had the creative name of Phraates V, she convinces the king to send his 4 other sons or heirs to Rome for education, leaving her son as the only heir. After 18 years of marriage, the Parthian historians believe she poisoned her husband. So here we are in 2 BC. She then takes the throne for herself. Not only does she take power as a foreigner, but the coins minted during that era label her as, deep breath, Thea Musa Orania. Okay, that was disappointing. Oh, wait, no, it translates to Queen of Heaven. In classic Semiramis fashion, Musa then strengthened the throne by marrying her son. Ew. I mean, even Josephus, the historian, goes into great length about this, despite modern historians doubting the actual incest of the incestuous tales. So the whore of Babylon becomes an embarrassment to her subject. The locals support a coup, yet Musa manages to flee Parthia alive. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The book that I read and lost, sorry, I would have cited it otherwise, went away from the official record of Musa. With this fella's Cleopatra theory, she fled to a logical nearby ally, Herod the Great. Why Herod? Remember, he's married to her half-sister. And here's where it gets confusing and potentially even grosser. Historical accounts describe Phraates V finding safety in Rome. Okay. Yet in an alternate version of the story, Herod offers Musa an estate for her and her youngest child. I mean, child? Now, remember, Phraates V is now about in his 20s and in Rome. This child better not be under the age of 6 or... Oh. Ugh. The guy who wrote the Cleopatra thread into this vile story just kind of stops the story here. But for me, oh boy, did my mind ever kick into overdrive. Because of that quote we heard, let not the sin of his mother be blotted out. Once again, Peter clearly establishes that Judas is the fulfillment of the Psalm 109 prophecy. And in the middle of the details, David brings up Judas's sinful mother. Yet biblically, there's not a zilch, nothing about any mother figure for Judas. Why would David sense evil 1,000 years before the event happened? Why would David fixate on the sins of a mother unless it was clearly epic? Musa was real. Musa really married her son. Cleopatra's daughter is a theory. The incest baby is a theory. Yet with all the Semiramis symbolism and connections to the son of perdition for Judas, Musa would be the perfect mother for Judas. Too far-fetched to believe. So shortly after Judas hangs himself, his wife would learn the truth. What would she do? A common Hebrew might move to another town to avoid scandal. But Israel is pretty small. If the theory is true, Judas has the blood of Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, and Phraates, either 4 or 5, in his veins. That's clout. It's not safe to stay in Israel, so they travel to, quote, desolate places in southern France. Instead of Mary Magdalene and Sarah landing at Saint-Marie-de-la-Mer, it's Mrs. Iscariot and Sarah. Remember, the gypsies and locals in Saint-Marie de la Mer celebrate the arrival of Sarah the Black. Sarah has a darker complexion, Egyptian, Roman, Parthian, than the mother, likely Hebrew. The father was somebody very, very important, but just not Jesus. Do you dare say Judas Jr.? Of course not. A devious lie in secret, like being the daughter of Jesus, would help keep the secret under wraps. If folks learned it was the bloodline of Judas, no help. If folks thought it was the secret bloodline of Jesus, hey, Jesus is cool. And keeping it a secret would protect the Catholic Church from a demystifying scandal. How did it connect to the gypsies? No clue. But it would be a great place to hide the bloodline, since they are continually vagabonds, like 109 says. How does it connect to the Freemasons? Well, according to all that Dan Brown lore, the French Merovingian kings claimed a divine bloodline. Their mythology? According to the 7th century Chronicle of Fredegar, this is what it says. It is said that while Claudio was staying at the seaside with his wife one summer, his wife went into the sea at midday to bathe, and a beast of Neptune, rather like a quinotar, found her. In the event, she was made pregnant either by the beast or by her husband, and she gave birth to a son named Merovec, from whom the kings of the Franks have subsequently been called Merovingians. Recap: beast from sea, really. Regardless of the mythological origins, Merovingians were strange, long-haired healers with supposed divine origins. Oh, and from the same region in France as Judas Jr. Yep. While they ruled for a while, the Catholic Church apparently ended the rule by sending assassins to take them out. The surviving heirs had their name blotted out from the historical records after that, but right before the Crusades, a French nobleman with a secretive past is supported by a mysterious enclave. The Frenchman, Godfrey de Bouillon. Historically, he joins the Crusades and becomes the first ruler of Jerusalem after the Holy Land is taken. This is where the Templar Knights fuse into the story. Historically, the Templar Knights lasted another 2 centuries before the Catholic Church once again takes them out. After that, the conspiracy theorists connect the remnants of the Templar Knights to the rebirth in modern Freemasonry. Modern Freemasons don't like this connection, of course. Why would they? But the 20th century's #1 conspiracy theory nut, not Dan Brown, sure liked theories like this. It helped explain Hitler's motives. And if Hitler did indeed fail, here comes the end times. Just as Jesus said, Judas has a connection as a son of perdition. Just as perdition, in theory, promised Judas 2,000 years ago, in exchange for betraying Jesus, that his wife and children would be protected. Just as David predicted, the bloodline of cursed fathers and a wicked mother would continue for generation after generation. Just as Paul wrote, the truth about the man of sin would be revealed just before the end times. So when the beast from earth stands behind his main man, the Antichrist, remember that this prophet of evil won't just be some regular Joe. He'll likely be a regular Judas.